I call the honourable member for Hunter.
And I thank you very much, Madam Speaker. When you think about it, Madam Speaker, there are two things in agriculture policy that rise above all others, that are paramount. The first is natural resource management and sustainability, and the second is biosecurity. As a bill implementing the reform of our biosecurity construct and architecture, this is one of the most important debates this House will have this decade. That is no exaggeration, Madam Speaker. Indeed, maybe I should have said this very century. After all, it has been almost just a little more than a century since we last put our quarantine system into effect. So this very much, so far at least, is a once in a century proposition. This bill means as much as any defence or national security bill which comes before this parliament means. It is that important, and on that basis it is as justifying of bipartisan support than is any other matter that comes before this parliament. A bipartisanship, by the way, I've sought to bring to the agriculture portfolio more generally, in the belief that agriculture is so important and will be so important to our future, and is so complex and is in need of such long time horizons that we must take agriculture as best as we can. We will always have our disagreements, and any opposition not having its disagreements with the government would not be doing its job to full effect. But generally speaking, we must strive to take a bipartisan approach to agriculture policy. It is so important to the national debate because, like defence, it goes to our very existence. Dropping the ball on agriculture policy would be an existential threat, because maintaining our food security, our ability to sustain ourselves independently of any other country, does go to the very survival of our country. So our biosecurity, formerly known, or more commonly known as our quarantine regime, is of paramount importance to this place. Yet, as the Bell inquiry, a seminal report into our biosecurity system, noted, biosecurity in this place usually only rates a mention when something goes wrong, rather than regularly rating a mention as things almost always go right. And that is somewhat of a source of disappointment to me, and I'm sure many others in this place. This bill, like the Beale review and other reviews that went before it, were and are a Labor government initiative. And it was churlish, I have to say, departing from that bipartisan tone for just a moment, for the current minister not to acknowledge that fact. Indeed, the Abbott government has now sat on this bill for almost 18 months. It was an initiative of a Labor government. It was progressed and developed by a Labor government which was ready to implement the reform when it lost office 17 months ago. Indeed, the minister has said that his northern venture allowed him to prepare for and implement legislative changes which are a comprehensive redesign of the Biosecurity Act. He said, in quotes, "The Biosecurity Act has been sitting with us since Methuselah was a young child." Somewhat of an exaggeration, I think, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you would agree, but that's not so important. He says it's an incredibly complicated piece of legislation that we have to completely update for 2014. He was speaking last year. In the legislative framework, we are rewriting the whole Act. So in essence, it takes into account all of the requirements we have, bringing it into the modern world to deal with modern problems. The problems of 1908, he said, are not the problems now. Well, I don't disagree with any of that, Mr Deputy Speaker. But again, it was rather churlish of him to be claiming this bill as his own when, as we all know in this place, it had its origins with the member for Watson when he was the minister, and of course was progressed right through the tenure of Senator Ludwig, so a long, long time ago. It was Labor which recognised the importance of upgrading and modernising Australia's biosecurity laws, and it was a Labor government that first introduced the bill right back in 2012. On the 19th of February 2008, the then Minister for Agriculture, as I mentioned, the member for Watson, announced the comprehensive independent review of Australia's quarantine and biosecurity arrangements to be undertaken by an independent panel of experts, chaired, as I indicated, by Roger Beale, AO, and the rest of his panel. The current bill before the Parliament is essentially identical to Labor's bill, save for a few minor adjustments at face value, at least I don't have any great difficulty with, but save for a very, very big departure, and that departure is the decision or the absence of any guarantee that the Inspector General for Biosecurity will continue to play a role. So this bill, and I will return to that point, Mr Deputy Speaker. So the bill is about modernising a now 107-year-old Quarantine Act. As Bill points out in his seminal report, the very name change from Quarantine Act to Biosecurity Act in itself reflects changing challenges, aspirations, emphasis and, of course, methods. A shift away from the isolationist approach we were more familiar with, or those who were around were more familiar with back then, just after the turn of the century, to a seamless, broader, from pre-border right through to post-border approach to the protection of our clean, green, safe image and, of course, therefore, the protection of our food security. The Bell report concluded that we have a very, very good biosecurity system, and its overwhelming success is testament to that. We have had, by any measure, a very successful approach to keeping disease and pests out of our food cycle, food chain. But Bill also concluded that the system is not perfect, and that's fairly obvious, and sadly and tragically we've seen examples of those failures in recent years, including during the equine influenza outbreak and crisis, which, by the way, had a very, very bad impact on my electorate, where, amongst other things, you will find the horse capital of Australia, Mr Deputy Speaker. Bill also reinforced, very importantly, the view that, and I'm sure it's a view that is shared by every person in this place, that a zero-risk approach to quarantine is not a feasible approach, not one which is likely to lead to success, and certainly not one that we could afford in fiscal or resourcing terms. Rather, he reinforces a risk-based approach to our quarantine system. So again, this bill is a significant modernisation, a long time in the making. That is a long time from 1908 to now, but a long time since the bill inquiry was first initiated. So on that basis, the opposition will be supporting the bill, our bill, but I want to spend some time expressing very great concern about the key departure I made mention of, and that is the decision, as it seems, to deny the very, very important initiative in Labor's bill, and that is the establishment and therefore the ongoing existence of an independent statutory officer known as the Inspector General of Biosecurity. I'm going to invite the Minister, when closing on this debate, to clarify for the House exactly what the bill now means in practical and technical terms. It appears to me that now, rather than have an independent statutory officer reviewing the performance of our biosecurity system and all of its players, that we will now have no less than the Minister overseeing these processes. That would be of concern to me. It will be a concern to everyone in this place, I'm sure, if they are speaking honestly. It should be a concern to the Minister, quite frankly, because it's not a responsibility he should even seek to have. And it will certainly, in my view, be of concern to the broader agricultural sector, the broad agriculture sector. This won't be the first offence. While the Labor government already had in place the interim Inspector General for Biosecurity, we had proposed also to further strengthen confidence and to build sustainability in the live cattle trade, an intention of introducing or implementing or putting in place an Inspector General for live animal welfare and live animal exports. Sadly, that commitment didn't survive the transition to the new government, much to the chagrin of those who are deeply focused on animal welfare, and in particular animal welfare in our live export market. Why the Minister, seemingly, as far as I can see, without any advice, and if he has reasons and good advice, I'd certainly invite him to share them with us. But seemingly, a little bit like CBH's exemption from the Wheat Port Access Code, he's just unilaterally made a decision that this statutory officer isn't needed. The Inspector General that Labor had in mind has done on an interim basis and would have reported independently of the Minister's view and indeed the view of the department. This is a mistake, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to remove this. The position plays an important role ensuring the integrity and transparency of the biosecurity import risk analysis process. Stakeholders have the opportunity to appeal where they believe there was significant deviation from the biosecurity import risk analysis process, which might have adversely affected their interests. Not only does the Inspector General ensure transparency and integrity in the biosecurity system more broadly, the position also establishes a number of powers to ensure transparency in the way the role is carried out. The position of Inspector General of Biosecurity is a position that was recommended in numerous reviews over the course of the last 17 years. And yet the Minister has just apparently unilaterally decided we don't need him or her. By having a dedicated office to review the performance of functions and the exercise of powers by the Director of Biosecurity, all Australians can expect an efficient, modern and robust biosecurity framework. Now, the Minister's office appears on the surface to remain supportive of the interim Inspector General of Biosecurity and the continuation of that position for the time being. But given I, as Minister, signed off on the interim arrangements, I think in financial years terms almost 2 years ago, it's my understanding that the interim Inspector General will cease to exist on July 1 this year. So it appears to me that while feigning support and being complimentary of the work of the Inspector General thus far, the Minister has, without any fanfare, without any sufficient highlight of this fact, certainly I don't think any reference to the fact in his second reading contribution, I would need to check that. He's just decided to let this position expire on July 1 of this year. Why? Why, as we strive I hope on a bipartisan basis in this place, to capitalise on growing global food demand, exploiting for one of, or taking advantage of our clean, green, safe image, our high-quality food, which gives us our competitive advantage. Why would we now undermine that in any way, by taking away a position which for the last couple of years has been very effective, as acknowledged by the Minister himself? This was the same issue with live animal exports. The pause has been broadly criticised, and it was painful. It was painful and it was regrettable. But born out of it was the best animal welfare system in the world, a system which now is allowing us to open new markets, a system which is building confidence in the regime, in the trade, in the broader community, and therefore a system which allows us to grow and strengthen the sector and to create so many jobs. It's a shame that the Minister doesn't occasionally acknowledge that when he's taking credit for establishing new markets, although ironically and almost bizarrely he does recognise that he was able to do so thanks to the implementation of Labor's quality assurance supply chain. This is the same, Mr Deputy Speaker. We must have full confidence in our biosecurity system, and we must be able to allow the citizens of this country to see that there is a statutory officer there acting independently, protecting that system. It can't be perfect, as I've pointed out and as Mr Bill pointed out, but the statutory officer is a key component, in my view, and I'm sure, if they're being honest, the majority of people in this place, to making sure that our biosecurity system is the best it possibly can be. So, one, let us not have the Minister claim credit for this bill. Let the credit go where it belongs, and that is to the former Labor government. That is not to say that after 107 years, Mr Deputy Speaker, a coalition government would not have got around to the same exercise. I've no doubt it would have done, because the globe, every country, is facing new challenges with the ongoing globalisation of our population, for example, and the emergence of new disease and new pests, etc. So I've no doubt that the coalition government would have come around to the same form of reform itself at some point. But let us not have or promote this idea that this was somehow something Barnaby Joyce dreamt up overnight, because we know he often has those dreams. Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm told he brings them to work regularly on a Monday morning. You might have heard the same. I began by talking about the importance of agriculture. There is no doubt in my mind that over the course of the next 20 years our economy will transform substantially. We now think of the mining boom. We'll be thinking then more about what I like to describe as the dining boom. But the dining boom won't just come to us. We will need to go to it. And despite the growing demand and doubts about our capacity to meet that demand as a global community, there is a lot of competition out there, a lot of people in other countries seeking to capitalise on the opportunities that dining boom presents. For us, it won't be about volume, it will be about quality and profits. With our limited natural resources, we can't possibly triple or increase our food output fourfold or even greater. But what we can do is ensure that our natural resources, our limited natural resources, are dedicated to the areas where we will secure the highest return and the highest quality jobs for Australians. And that advantage will only continue to exist if we maintain our clean, green, safe image. And there's been a little bit of debate more recently also about the way that investors in the future, typically those who manage big superannuation funds, for example, the way that which they will be discerning in their investment decisions, taking into account the ethical standards used in particular sectors. And let there be no doubt that in the future, the growing middle classes of Asia will be looking for food from sources where all those ethical standards have been maintained. And one of those measures will be the way in which we manage our resources, our natural resources, the way in which we manage our water and our soils, being the two key examples. And that's why it just astounds me that this government still hasn't not only produced a strategic plan for agriculture in this country, but laid down terms of reference for a white paper, now months late, which excluded any consideration of natural resource management and sustainability. The biggest challenge for us in the future in agriculture will be the growing challenges in resource sustainability, in particular the ongoing dry nature of our continent. And you can't have a strategic plan for agriculture without having, as a part of a strategic plan, an idea about how you're going to tackle those natural resource sustainability issues, particularly climate change and the dryness, the ongoing heating and dryness of our continent. So while we've had 17 months of policy inertia, in other words, 17 months without an agriculture policy in this country, our competitors are on the march. They're already working in Asia with their plans. They're already taking advantage of their natural competitive edge. But in the meantime, we are just jogging on the spot, marking time. And it makes me angry when I see what were very good Labor initiatives like the one before us today being undermined by a decision like that going to the position of the Inspector General for Biosecurity without any real effort to explain the decision, without any real effort to highlight that decision before this place, and certainly without any effort whatsoever, in fact, arguably just the opposite, not to alert me as Labor's spokesperson on this question to that initiative and the likely ramifications of that initiative. So I invite him, when he returns, that is the Minister, to now highlight that point, to provide the sources of advice for his decision, to share it with us on balance, what he sees as the positives and the negatives of that decision. There will always be all of those. I'm sure I welcome the fact that he might be able to come up with some good reasons why it's not necessary to have the Inspector General, but if he does so, he needs to also concede that there are real problems with that decision and then attempt to argue that it is a net positive. I don't think he'll be able to do that, Mr Deputy Speaker. In fact, I'm very sure he won't be able to do that. One, because I've looked at the issue and taken my own advice. But two, because I know that if he was confident in this decision, I know that if he really thought this was a good idea, it would have been writ large in the briefings to me, and it would have been writ large in his earlier contribution in this place. Now, maybe he was rolled, Mr Deputy Speaker. Maybe this wasn't his idea. Maybe this wasn't his idea, and he's not proud of it, and he wants to sweep it under the carpet, doesn't want to talk about it. He knows the adverse consequences for agriculture. I can understand that. Many of us in this room have been ministers, and we know how difficult the challenges can be. But for all that Barnaby might be, the Minister might be, Mr Deputy Speaker, I didn't think he was a guy that lacked courage. I didn't think he was a guy that lacked courage, and I would have expected that even if he didn't agree with the Cabinet position, that he would have come in here and alerted his constituency, all those in his constituency who relies so heavily on our biosecurity regime, he would have come in here and he explained the situation to them. So the very fact that he didn't do any of that confirms in my mind that this is a bad decision and he needs to come back in here and explain himself. There'll be a Senate inquiry on this bill, and the Minister can be very sure that we will pursue this issue in great detail in the other place. He has an opportunity to save everyone a bit of time and to come in here on closing this debate and explain to everyone in the agriculture sector, but indeed everyone in the Australian community who is relying upon us to have the best biosecurity system we can possibly have for the future growth, well-being and wealth of this country. I finish where I began. This bill and our biosecurity system is as important as anything else we discuss in this place. It does go to our food security, and beyond that, it goes to how wealthy we are likely to be as a country in the coming decades. And we can't grasp that wealth, we can't make the most of those opportunities without the best biosecurity system in the world. I believe, very sincerely, and I believe that all those who participated in the panel of review would say that the bill Labor had before the House provided the very best biosecurity system we can possibly have. I'm not convinced that the bill that's before the House, simply because of the exclusion of an ongoing role for the Inspector General of Biosecurity, is a bill that provides us with the very best biosecurity regime we could possibly have. And there's plenty of time for the Minister to reflect on that, plenty of time for the Cabinet to reflect on that, plenty of time for the Prime Minister to reflect on that as he contemplates some of his necessary changes in the coming days and weeks, if he lasts that long. Here's an opportunity here to either explain it and justify it, or to reinstate Labor's very, very important initiative. The Inspector General of Biosecurity might cost some money, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm sure he does. In fact, I know he does. But on any cost to benefit analysis, it's hard to see how what would be a very small savings in the context of a $400 billion budget is justified, given the risks that would be posed by not ensuring that this bill is as strong as it possibly can be, and therefore by not ensuring that we have the strongest quarantine or biosecurity system this country can possibly have. So there's our qualified support. In fact, you would say, other than for the Inspector General's issue, our very strong support for the bill, but now it's over to the Minister.